The International Maritime University of Panama, together with the Maritime Technology Cooperación Centro, Latin America, we would like to welcome you to the webinar MEPC 76 and its technical outcomes toward a decarbonized shipping industry. Sean bienvenidos todos al webinar MEPC 76 y sus resultados técnicos hacia un transporte marítimo decarbonizado. Welcome, bienvenidos. Now we're going to present the agenda of the webinar for your reference. Ahora presentaremos la agenda del webinar para su referencia. A continuación, las palabras de bienvenida por parte del ingeniero Rafael Cigarruista. El ingeniero Cigarruista obtuvo su título de ingeniero náutico con especialización en navegación y transporte marítimo en la Escuela Náutica de Panamá. Trabajó a bordo de varios tipos de buque como primer oficial de cubierta, lidera su propia empresa de inspección de banderas e investigación de accidentes, es perito naval en el Segundo Tribunal Marítimo de Panamá y aparte también se ha destacado como profesor de varias universidades a nivel nacional. Con ustedes, el ingeniero Rafael Cigarruista.
Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Sí se escucha.
Ok. La cámara, estoy tratando de encenderla. Bueno, la dejamos apagada. Buenos días a todos. Para mí es un grato placer compartir nuevamente con colegas, con amigos y con gente de la industria otro foro relacionado a temas ambientales, temas que definitivamente toman mayor preponderancia en nuestro mundo actual y de donde se desprenden responsabilidades como sociedad. Gracias a los amigos por la invitación y a los expositores por compartir de manera desinteresada conocimiento que permea en la industria. Para la Autoridad Marítima de Panamá es un placer participar en este webinar sobre el MEPC 76 y sus resultados técnicos hacia un transporte marítimo descarbonizado. La protección del ambiente es un tema prioritario para nuestra administración. Es por esto que nos hemos involucrado en distintas discusiones que se han llevado a cabo en la Organización Marítima Internacional a través de nuestra misión permanente en la UMIP. Sin dejar de un lado el soporte técnico de todos los departamentos que conforman la Dirección General de Marina Mercante desde Casa Matriz en Panamá. El MEPC 76, en el cual se discuten, entre otras cosas, el objetivo para reducir la intensidad de carbono de los buques en un 40% para el año 2030, es una oportunidad para que todos los actores del sector marítimo revisen de forma crítica cómo pueden contribuir a la protección de los mares y de la atmósfera. Qué curioso en el sector marítimo hablar de atmósfera, pero definitivamente que las emisiones que en un momento determinado pueden generar contaminación deben de generar preocupación, no solamente para el sector marítimo, sino para el sector aéreo y el sector terrestre. Respecto a las medidas técnicas y operacionales basadas en objetivos y que son obligatorias para reducir la intensidad de carbono en el transporte marítimo internacional, destaca la adopción a las enmiendas del anexo sexto del convenio Marpol, que debe entrar en vigor en noviembre de 2022 y se aprobaron las directrices técnicas para la implementación de las medidas técnicas y operacionales, entre las cuales resaltan métodos de cálculo del índice de eficiencia energética, reconocimiento y certificación del índice de eficiencia energética, sistema de limitación de la potencia en el eje del motor para cumplir las prescripciones, factores de reducción de intensidad de carbono operacional, indicadores de la intensidad del carbono operacional y los métodos de cálculo, niveles de referencia para su utilización, clasificación de la intensidad de carbono operacional, entre otros. El comité igualmente adoptó enmiendas a los instrumentos de obligatorio cumplimiento, como lo son enmiendas al anexo 1 del convenio Marpol relativa a la prohibición de la utilización y transporte del fuel oil pesado como combustible para los buques en aguas del Ártico. Enmiendas al anexo 1 y cuarto del convenio Marpol relativa a la exención de las gabarras UNSP de las prescripciones de reconocimiento y certificación, y del mismo modo enmiendas al código anti-fouling o de sistemas anticrustantes para el control y seguimiento de las mismas. Panamá, como Estado parte de la Organización Marítima Internacional y cumpliendo con sus responsabilidades como Estado de bandera, Estado ribereño y Estado rector de puerto, estuvo presente tomando parte activa sobre o durante las diferentes reuniones y sobre los temas en discusión. Panamá mantiene dentro de su esquema de incentivos diferentes herramientas para propiciar que nuestros armadores generen nuevas tecnologías, nuevas construcciones, nuevas metodologías de trabajo. Y entre ellos mantenemos, como dije hace un momento, incentivos en la reducción en el pago de impuestos, bajo el esquema o la figura de EcoChip. Lo que se busca con esto es que las embarcaciones que en un periodo de 3 años logren probar que han reducido sus emisiones en un 50%, gocen de reducción en el pago de sus impuestos, lo cual pues genera que las embarcaciones sean mucho más eficientes en sus operaciones y en su control. El registro de buques de Panamá continúa su labor de ser vigilante del cumplimiento de las normas internacionales y de buscar beneficios para sus usuarios y para el país. Con estas cortas palabras, inauguro el evento y nuevamente en nombre de la Autoridad Marítima de Panamá, muchas gracias por la invitación y estamos anuentes a seguir participando en actividades como esta en beneficio de la industria marítima de nuestro país y del mundo, como Estado líder en abanderamiento y formando parte de la industria marítima internacional. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, ingeniero cigarruista, por sus palabras. Y a continuación presentaremos a los moderadores del día de hoy. The moderators for today's webinar will be Engineer Erwin Vargas, Technical Director of MTCC Latin America, and Engineer Javier Díaz, Technical Officer of MTCC Latin America.
Good morning. Thank you, Adriana. After the great opening words by Engineer Rafael Cigarruista, we are ready to start our today's webinar. Our first speaker, with over 23 years in maritime expertise, both at sea and shore, is the US and Canada account team manager at Lloyd's Register. He was in charge of the Department of Regulatory and External Affairs for Lloyd's Register in the Americas. He was previously worked as Service Delivery Manager for Central and South America region, leading the operational team and fosters industry and customer relationships in the Central and South America region. Leading the regulatory and external affairs, of Lloyd Register across the Americas, he provided support to service delivery team, service delivery support, and account management team, while also acting as main contact within the U.S. Coast Guard and Transport Canada and other flag states in the Americas and industry stakeholders. He is a senior surveyor, senior auditor, training, and champion for several projects within Lloyd Register. He graduated from the Escuela Náutica de Panamá and began his seafaring career as deck cadet, working his way up to chief officer on cargo ships. He received his master's degrees on Panama Canal Studies and International Maritime Industry. Also, he has worked as a flag state inspector of Malta and worked as a marine surveyor and auditor for Lloyd Register New Orleans, USA. Also, is an authorized trainer for Lloyd's Register and has conducted multiple internal and external training engagements. He is a fellow of the Nautical Institute and active supporter of the maritime industry in Panama. We welcome and give the floor now to Engineer Edilberto Peralta with the topic CII Carbon Intensity Indicator and Technical Aspects.
Well, thank you, Javier, for those words. Yeah, it's a pleasure for me to be here again and share with you some of the new topics that the MEPC 76 approved last June. So specifically, we're going to talk about the CII carbon intensity indicator. So let's start with the presentation. I assume everybody's listening okay, so I'll proceed. So what is this topic, carbon intensity? Is really related to decarbonization. As you know, IMO has set the targets that were mentioned by Rafael in the previous introduction words. The idea is to reduce the carbon intensity and bring down the number of greenhouse gases. So there are short-term measures, being carbon intensity or the CII one of them. So my colleagues will spend about the other topics, EXI, EEDI, and SEM. This is specifically about carbon intensity and what this is all about. So, as mentioned, the IMO is a regulatory body setting the greenhouse gas reduction strategy based from 2018. And the idea is to reduce the carbon intensity by 40%. That's a goal for 2030, and there is another goal also for 2050. Meantime, we are focused on how we're going to achieve that target of 40% down by 2030. When we talk about 2030, that means we take the reference of 2008 levels. So we use the levels measured on 2008 regarding the carbon intensity. So at the end, the main target of this is to move the industry to new technologies. Of course, we will keep using the fossil fuels until there are technology available or what we call low or zero carbon fuels. When we're talking about zero carbon fuels, we're talking about ships using hydrogen or ammonia, as a way to as a marine fuel for the voyages. So it's a whole new technology. Talking about zero carbon fuel ships is, it's changing completely the market. So the main idea is using fuels that have no carbon footprint. But the challenge right now is, is to build up that infrastructure around the world to get, a world-scale ammonia production plant, for example, to make enough ammonia or hydrogen for the entire fleet, which is quite a challenge globally. So going back to carbon intensity, the idea is to bring more work or more cargo using less fuel, or using fuel without no fossil fuels at all. So main topic is to the main target is to have the ships designed to be technically efficient. That means EXI, EDI. This is what we call the ticket to the game. But once you get your ship designed properly, you need to make sure you operate your ships efficiently. And this is where carbon intensity reduction came into the picture. So the application of this requirement is a little bit different from EXI. It applies to the same ship types. However, the application is for ships about 5,000 gross tonnage. So this is going to be the different on application compared with the EXI. So there are compliance options depending on the carbon intensity ratings. There are also correction factors to be used on the calculations. The survey and certification part is also being to be implemented from 2023. That means surveyors will have to go on board and verify the fuel consumption, statement of compliance, and what is the carbon intensity rating. So every vessel is going to have a CII rating or carbon intensity rating, which is it goes from A to E, A, B, C, D, and E. I will explain a little bit on the next slide what it means. So this is basically the type of ratings the ships are going to have. From 2023, basically, the CII requirements will take effect on all cargo ships and ro-ro, packs, and cruise ships above 5,000 gross tonnage. Of course, that trade internationally, this is something that needs to be applied to ships trading internationally. And these colors of these letters, basically A to E, will represent how efficient the ship is or how is operated from the carbon intensity point of view. There is a formula for the calculation. Basically, if you carry more cargo using less fuel, your carbon intensity rating is going to be improving. So this is actual emissions in operations. It's a calculation that we have to do in an annual basis. It's not the same like EXI, that is one-time calculation. This is something that it will be monitored on an annual basis. So to give you an example, this is how the calculation report looks. There's going to be some data about the ship, some information about the information used for the calculation, ship's name, speed, total CO2, what is the required CII, and what's the attained CII. If similar to EXI, if you have to have your values below the required CII set by the IMO in order to get a good rating. So you want to have your ship between this green and this yellow section here. Okay. If your ship is above this curve, that means you will need to take some action plans depending on the level of rating that you get. So this is kind of a timeline. Before 2023, before January 2023, basically all ships above 5,000 gross tonnage need to have an approved enhanced SEM. So that SEM will include the implementation on how to achieve those carbon intensity targets, the yearly calculation that is basically based on the IMO data collection system set by the IMO some years ago. And then ship will be given that rating from A to E that we saw in the previous slides. So if you, for example, if your vessel get a rating of D for 3 consecutive years, then you need to take a correction action plans in order to improve the numbers. But if your vessel get a rating on E just for a single year, then you also have to take a correction action plan. So the idea is to those ships that are not efficient, that are not or having a bad rating, or they go out of the market, or they take some action to improve the rating. So as a summary, what we want, or what the IMO wants, the whole industry is basically to have chips that are technically efficient chips from design. Okay, that's why we have EEDI and EXI. But from the carbon intensity reduction, which is the topic we mentioned, those ships that are efficiently and technically designed, the operators and the managers should operate them efficiently in order to keep a good rating. So it's like when you go into a store or to buy a fridge or to buy any appliance, you see they have some different coloring on how efficient they are. Similar is going to be with the ships. So charters, terminals, stakeholders will have, or we want to work with ships that are rating A, B, or C. Okay, so this is where the targets we want to be. Having the ships on this section is going to help the target of the IMO to bring that carbon intensity to 40% by 40% down on 2030, and also to support the greenhouse gas strategy set by the IMO. So how we can help, or how the different class societies are getting involved, basically from EXI, from CII, we get involved from the calculation process all the way to the survey and issue of the certificate, statement of compliance for carbon intensity, and the delivering a report showing that the ship rating is in compliance with the IMO, or if it's not in compliance, then an action plan needs to be approved. So this is a quick summary of what is the CII, or carbon intensity. It's all linked with the other topics that my colleagues will present in a few minutes. So you will see the relationship between carbon intensity reduction, EXI, and SEMP, and how they interact each other basically from November 2022 and 23, when all these requirements will enter into force. With that being said, well, that's my last slide. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share. If there are any questions or any topic you want to discuss further, we can do it. I don't know if now or we're doing at the end of the webinar. You're on mute, Javier.
Do it, and we have received 2 questions from the audience. So we'll have the first one: is the CII applicable for the same type ships as EXI and EEDI? And the second one is how can a ship owner control the CII?
Okay, the application of CII with EXI regarding ship types is the same ship types. What is the difference is the size. On CII, the application is for ships over 5,000 gross tons, as I mentioned. But basically, bulk carriers, gas carrier, tanker, container ships, all the ships listed on the reduction table of EXI are subject to CII. And the other question you mentioned was about how can be proved? Can you repeat that question?
How can ship owners control the CII?
How can ship owners control? Okay. So basically, CII is related to fuel consumption. Okay. So if you control your fuel consumption, what type of fuel you're burning, how efficient you are with the speed, with the cargo capacity of the ship, that will be, the parameters that the ship owner can use to improve the CII. So they got the tools available to hand. They need to make sure they run an efficient ship, carry more cargo using less fuel, or using alternative fuels to avoid, the carbon footprint on their emissions. That's basically how they can control or improve the CII.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Alberto Peralta, once again for the great presentation, the first presentation of today's webinar. And with this, we close the session for Q&A for the first presentation, and we would like now to present you a certificate of recognition for your great participation, Engineer Alberto Peralta, as always one of our main supporters at the MTCC Latin America. On behalf of all the International Maritime University of Panama and the MTCC Latin America, we present the certificate as a token of appreciation for your great presentation today.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Now we continue with the webinars. In that time, now we are going to present a second speaker, Mr. Alexis Rodriguez Almanza. He began his career as ordinary seaman in the International service vessel. He obtained his degree in law and political science with honors. Also, he held an MBA in INCAE Business School and a postgraduate in maritime energy from the World Maritime University in Malmö, Sweden. In the public sector, he has a head of compliance and enforcement department in the Panama Maritime Authority. And also, he was a former director on the International Affairs Office from the National Environmental Authority. He was a professor in international law and international convention on maritime issues, pollution, sustainability, and climate change, and was part of the Panama team that passed without non-conformity that IMO audit to Panama in 2008. Currently, he works as an environmental protection specialist at the Panama Canal Authority, seeking to strengthen the organization's environmental policies to promote the Panama Canal route as a green route at the international maritime trade. Now with us, Mr. Alexis Almanza, to present the topic, the green routes to reduce the CO2 emission and accelerate the decarbonization process. Hello, Mr. Alexis. We are here, just a minute. Mr. Alexis are waiting for participation. I think he has some issues, just coming in a few minutes. Important for everybody because that topic is something special to the decarbonization process, but how we can make the decarbonization without transition. And MEPC 76, we discussed a lot of topics, and for our region, Latin American region, this topic is so relevant because many people have to know how we comply or how the shipping company complies with all the new regulation to prevent the emissions from the ships, to reduce the greenhouse emission. In the Panama and all Latin American region, they have the Central America transit, all the Panama, in the Panama canals, transit a lot of ships on a lot of routes, not only Panama Canal, but around the world coming here. We want to discuss and to tell to everybody how we are going to the transition to the decarbonization process. For us, we are waiting for Mr. Alexis. In some few seconds, he is going to meet with us.
Habla.
Okay, continue. We are now some technical issues with Mr. Alexis. Now he's coming because he have some issues in his office, but now he's controlled. He's coming back in some few minutes. Now we are going to tell about the MEPC 76, about some of our important relation about this topic. We have many discussed when the MEPC 76 was the meeting in 2021 in July, but the meeting initial strategic ambition that have a combined technical and operational measure is all together, but referent as to short-term carbon intensity measure are in the line with the ambition of the national IMO strategy for the greenhouse gas emission, which aim to reduce the carbon intensity of the international shipping by 14% by 2030, compared to the 28. That's the initial strategy set up the short, mid, and long-term measurement. The measurement just adopted to fall on the short-term measures, but in the continue, we are discussed for who are the coming discussions, because have a number of submission on how to progress the next stage of the IMO works to cut the greenhouse emission from the ship, leading to the initial strategy in 2023. Yeah, this is the adopted the work plan. For that reason, this is important to all the audience have to know how the shipping industry are now in the time of the transition to decarbonization. This is important because everybody have to know, and also the seamen, the ports, all the maritime industry involved, that we call a maritime cluster. All the people are involved in that strategy of to reduce the greenhouse emission from the ships. All are involved. And for us in the Panama Canal, and also all around the world, are interesting to know how we can make this transition. And for us in the MTCC Latin America, we want to discuss that kind of topic for everybody, to understand the reason and the most important thing of the new regulation has the amendment in the MARPOL, in the annexes of the MARPOL. We will continue to present some of information to everybody about the next topics, because just only for your reference, the next presentation filmed from the naval architect Michalis Agapiu, after Alexis Rodriguez start, and coming another topic about the SEM, how the CAI has implemented with the SEM. What is the SEM? It's the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, and Mr. Agapiu have to discuss in that kind of topic. And after that, coming Mr. Captain Antonio Prestigiacomo from the DMV to present the topic of EEXI. It's an energy efficiency existing ship indicator. Well, we have to speak about that, and we compare with the CII how are involved in that part for the existing ship, for the new ship, and how they classify the ships. For us, there's many topics we can discuss, but just only have 3 hours to present that webinar. In the future, we are continuing process, not only make the webinar, we want to make also project together with all the stakeholder, community, authorities, or part involved on that kind to strategy of IMO to present that. I think we will back in some seconds to Mr. Alexis Rodriguez.
Desde el MTCC Latin America y la Universidad Marítima Internacional de Panamá estaremos presentando el webinar MEPC 76 y sus resultados técnicos hacia un transporte marítimo descarbonizado. El evento se realizará el próximo 2 de septiembre en horario de 9 de la mañana a 12 de mediodía. Esperamos poder contar con la participación de todos ustedes. En este seminario web abarcaremos los 2 requerimientos que fueron aprobados en la reunión del Comité de Protección del Medio Marino de la Organización Marítima Internacional, por sus siglas en inglés MEPC 76, donde se abarcaron los temas importantes para la reducción de la intensidad de carbono de la industria del transporte marítimo, entre los cuales tenemos el índice de eficiencia energética para buques existentes y el indicador de intensidad de carbono. Dentro de los temas y preguntas que se abarcarán, tenemos cuáles son los impactos del índice de eficiencia energética para buques existentes y el indicador de intensidad de carbono dentro de la industria del transporte marítimo. ¿Qué incertidumbres podría provocar la aplicación de estas nuevas enmiendas al convenio MARPOL a partir de enero de 2023? ¿Y cómo podríamos afrontar los desafíos hacia un transporte marítimo descarbonizado?
Este evento contará con la participación de expositores de reconocida trayectoria dentro del sector marítimo nacional e internacional. Por parte de Lloyd Tracer tendremos al ingeniero Edilberto Peralta presentando el tema indicador de intensidad de carbono y sus aspectos técnicos.
Por parte de DNB tenemos al capitán Antonio Prestigiacomo, quien estará presentando el tema cálculo del índice de eficiencia energética en buques existentes. Por parte
Okay, we will now proceed with our next speaker as we are trying to solve some technical issues with Mr. Alexis Rodriguez, and then he will take over the microphone. We will give the floor now to Naval Architect Michalis Agapiou from Cyprus. Michalis Agapiou is a naval architect and CEO of Synthesis Integrated Solutions, holder a bachelor degree in naval architecture. Mr. Agapiou has gained significant experience in the 13 years he has been professionally active within the shipping industry. Throughout his professional career, he has been engaged in various positions of naval architecture and marine technical consultancy services, marine surveying, and marine management system in auditing activities, and also in ship management activities, specifically a technical department. He's one of the co-founders and Chief Executive Officer of Synthesis Integrated Solution, which is a certified maritime technology startup company based in Cyprus. Synthesis, through its cloud-based software, is primarily engaged in ship fuel consumptions and GHG emissions monitoring, reporting, and verification activities for regulatory compliance. We talk about EU MRV, IMO DCS, EXI, CII, enhanced SEM, as well as in near real-time monitoring and assessment of ships' operational performance for optimizations. We're glad to give the floor now to Naval Architect Michalis Agapiou with the topic Enhanced SIMP after MEPC 76. Welcome, Mr. Michalis.
Good day to all. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to be participating in any activities of the MTCC Latin America. Thank you to the personnel of the MTCC Latin America for this opportunity and for this event, which is highly informative for anybody engaged in the maritime sector. My topic will be presenting for the enhanced SEM and how actually the enforcement of the CII will take place with the upcoming enforcement of the regulations. So if possible, Javier, just confirm that my screen is appearing to you normally to make sure that I'm not proceeding without.
Still not sure, Mihalis. We still.
Just one sec. How about now?
Mr. Michalis, now we see your presentation.
You can.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, let me begin by specifying what everybody already knows, what is a Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, or SEM. Consisting of strategies and procedures for monitoring and assessing a ship's fuel consumption and subsequent CO2 emissions against the transport work over a period of time. The aim is to improve the energy efficiency of the ship and subsequently reduce its environmental footprint in a cost-effective manner. In fact, the IMO studies show that the aggregated increased energy efficiency potential solely based on operational measures is highest than any or altogether of the technical measures, and of course, far more cost-effective. So let me begin by saying that where there is an obligation, in this case, there is also an opportunity for companies in complying and at the same time gaining added value for their ships and fleet. The SEM provides an approach for ship management companies to manage either a single ship or a fleet of ships efficiency over time. And it uses monitoring tools such as the Energy Efficiency Operational Indicator, which is calculated basically using ship's actual cargo quantity carried, or the Annual Efficiency Ratio, using the ship's deadweight as a cargo proxy. The energy efficiency of the ship is measured as an expression of CO2 emissions within a specific period of time, divided by the transport work, which is the distance sailed, multiplied by the cargo carried or deadweight over the same period of time. As initially introduced, all ships of 400 GT and above should be equipped with a Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan. Now this is part 1. The scope, as we mentioned, is to provide guidance on shipboard procedures and practices aimed at improving the energy efficiency and conservation. SEM can be part of the SMS of the company and subject of ISM audit, but does not need to be approved by the flag or RO. This was the case up to introduction of IMO DCS with the SEM Part 2. Recognized organization acting on behalf of the flag administration should check whether the SEM is ship-specific and based on the relevant resolution guidelines for development of SEM. This was the case, as I mentioned, up to the introduction of IMO DCS. However, this allowed a gap in the necessity of ship management companies to actually make use of the SEM on monitoring and reporting or assessing ship's performance and continuously improving it. With the introduction of the IMO DCS, the relevant regulation was modified to expand the SEM for ships over 5,000 GT by introducing the SEM Part 2, which has to be assessed and verified by independent verifiers acting on behalf of flag administrations. This SEM Part 2 contains verified details on ship principal particulars, on fuel consumers on board, main engines, auxiliaries, boilers, etc., and of course, procedures and methodologies for the annual fuel data consumption, distance sailed, and hours underway collection and reporting for independent verification on an annual basis. Companies are now obliged to report on this annual basis and the data to be verified, actually forcing the use of SEM Part 2. Realizing, though, that a more ambitious greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategy is necessary, IMO has pushed ahead with new regulatory requirements, utilizing both technical through the EXI and operational through the CAI measures. One of these measures is the enhanced SEM. The enhanced SEM is actually a strengthening of the current SEM Parts 1 and 2 to include mandatory content which will enable the facilitation, assessment, and continuous improvement of CII. As such, it must contain an implementation plan on how to achieve the ship-specific CIA targets and, of course, making the results subject to approval. Verification and audit requirements for the CM will only apply to ships above 5,000 GT, subject to the CII requirements. Therefore, we can see through regulatory requirements development of the CM that the CM is indeed considered by the IMO as the tool for operational energy efficiency assessment and optimization. The specific requirements for the enhanced CM are reflected in MEPC Annex 1, amendments to the Annex of the protocol in Regulation 26. The two first paragraphs actually describe the current condition with the CM. Paragraph 1 mentions CM Part 1, and paragraph 2 actually refers to CM Part 2 and the necessity to annually monitor, report, and have independently verified the fuel consumption of the ships. In the third paragraph, it specified that in the case of a ship of 5,000 gross tonnage and above, which falls into one of the categories of the regulation, it must, on or before the 1st of January 2023, update the CM to include, first of all, a description of the methodology that will be used to calculate the ship's attained annual operational CI required by Regulation 28 of the regulation, and the processes that will be used to report this value to the ship's administration. There are specific guidelines on how this is calculated, but more or less, actually the CI is calculated first through the CII required value, which is a calculation based on the type and capacity of a vessel, and is checked against the attained CII, which is actually the CII required reduced by a reduction factor which changes every year. The second part to be included is the required annual operational CII, or the attained CII, as specified in regulation 28 for the next 3 years. Already the IMO has established how this factor will be used for the years 2023, 24, 25, and 26. So it's ranging from 5% to 11%, an increase of 2% each year. But for the years after 2026, there will be a further discussion and decision by IMO after evaluating the results of the first years of implementation. So the calculation that has to be inserted inside the enhanced SEM for the operational CII has to cover 3 years, 3 consecutive years each time. The next requirement is to include an implementation plan which has to document, to specify, how the required annual operational CII will be achieved during the next 3 years. So especially in the cases of ships that comply, these of course will specify the operational measures taken. For ships that have had some issues in meeting the requirements, and we will see the ratings further on, they have to specify which measures they will take in order to achieve the necessary compliance. Last, a procedure for self-evaluation is required, also pressing things towards continuous improvement. For a ship that will be rated as category D for 3 consecutive years or rated as C for 1 year, the SEM shall be reviewed in accordance with the regulation, and it has to include a plan of corrective actions in order to be able to achieve the required annual operational CII. These actions actually will range from some operational measures or even some stricter measures, but most common we anticipate it to affect by making use of engine power limitation. Otherwise, other technical measures have to be employed, for example, new technologies like wind-assisted propulsion, etc. The SEM now, in such cases, shall be subject to verification and company audits, taking into account the guidelines to be adopted by the organization. The CII and the enhanced SEM form part of a combined approach for short-based measures introduced by the IMO. The second part, the technical measures, is actually the EXI. So the ex-post annual carbon intensity verification will allow for monitoring the effectiveness of the EXI in achieving the required CII. And in case the required CII is not achieved, additional operational measures will have to be implemented by the ship. A review of this whole goal-based short-term measure will be completed by IMO by 1st January 2026. So in RAF, the carbon intensity indicator, the operational approach of the regulation, applies to 5,000 GT ships and above. The target is for ships to achieve a required operational energy efficiency CII in accordance with the carbon intensity indicator reduction factor, the table we saw with the reduction from 5 to 11%. The CIIs to be used will be the annual efficiency ratio and using the deadweight as cargo proxy, and is based on the actual reporting that is currently being made for IMO DCS. So actually, companies will continue to measure same things that they are using for IMO DCS, and these data will be utilized to, in the end, calculate the CII. The carbon intensity calculation is largely based on this IMO DCS, and the data that will be approved, verified, and finally reported in the GISIS database. The annual energy efficiency performance will then be rated against reference lines, which will define the required carbon intensity reduction for each rating. We will see a diagram shortly. The annual carbon intensity calculation and associated rating will be verified by the flag administration, which will issue a relevant statement of compliance. In Regulation 28 on the operational carbon intensity, there are details on how the attained annual operational carbon intensity indicator is calculated. And actually, the process followed is more or less the same that is being used for the IMO DCS. So the data collected are actually the fuel consumption within the annual period, along with the distance sailed, hours underway, etc. These data, as verified, will be then used to calculate the CII. What has to be included in the enhanced SEM regarding the CII are two values. First, it has to be the calculation of the required annual operational carbon intensity indicator as per formula that appears here, where Z is actually the reduction factor. So the other thing that has to be included is actually the calculation of the, this is the attained, the calculation of the CII, the required one. So the CII required is calculation using the reduction factor for each year. And as we mentioned, the reduction has to take into account 3 consecutive years each time. The rating system, as has been provided in the regulation, minor superior, moderate, minor inferior, and inferior. Where you can see the small d letters with the numbers, these are actually called vectors. There are values that actually range from the required CII calculated for a specific ship, and they have to be reflected into the SEM in order to establish at each point in time what the CII of the vessel is. The enhanced SEM shall include, as I mentioned, the required annual CII for the next 3 years, the implementation plan, the procedure for self-evaluation and improvement, and of course, if necessary, that remains for a ship under rating D for 3 years or rating E, a plan of corrective actions. According to the new regulation as well, administration, port authorities, and other stakeholders are encouraged by the IMO to provide incentives to ships rated as A or B. So there are also incentives in order for companies to proceed and achieve better results for their vessels. Here in this slide, I just want to present to you a detail of how the rating takes place and how it can be evaluated on an ongoing basis in order for companies to be able to take measures in order to let's say, have an indication of where their CII is heading throughout the year. So on the left, you can see a rating based on last reporting period. This means the calculation based on the IMO DCS verified data. And on the column on the right, you can see how a model would monitor and assess the CII rating over the year. So, for example, in our system, we have this arrangement, and we know beforehand for all vessels that we have assessed that their rating at this point, if the regulation would come into force today, would be as per the calculation we carry out for the IMO verified data of 2020. And on the next slide, on the next side, we can see actually the vessels that report to us what is their current performance if projected by the end of the year, in order to know ahead if they have to take some measures to achieve a better rating by the end of the year. I want to specify a bit more about what is needed as corrective actions and incentives by the IMO. So the important thing is that in the case that the ship is rated for 3 consecutive years as D or 1 year as E, this plan of corrective actions have to be developed, included, and approved within the enhanced SEM. So the SEM shall be reviewed to include this plan of corrective actions, taking into account the guidelines of the organization. The revised SEM shall be submitted to the administration or the organizations that are duly authorized by it for the verification, preferably together with, but in no case later than 1 month after reporting the attained annual operational CII according to the regulation. A ship that has been rated D or E shall duly undertake the planned corrective actions in accordance with the revised SEM. This means that in case a vessel is inspected by post-take control, it is possible to be requested to present the enhanced SEM and the results for the calculation, the required CII for the 3 years, plus the attained CII, plus the corrective actions and how those are implemented. So companies are forced to comply in order to avoid any issues. What is next according to IMO? By 1st of January 2026, the effectiveness of the regulation in reducing the carbon intensity of international shipping will be assessed. The need for reinforced corrective actions or other means of remedy, including possible additional EEXI requirements, will be assessed. The need for enhancement of the enforcement mechanism and the need for enhancement of the data collection system will also be assessed. And of course, there will be a revision of the Z factor and definition of the new factors for the years from 2026. I want to close the presentation by giving an overview of how companies could better manage the enhanced SEM and the overall regulatory compliance process, not only to achieve compliance, but in order to achieve performance optimization, save on fuel, save on reputation, and save on environmental impact. So there is a drive towards digitalization, and this is becoming more intense because the regulation requirements are always increasing. So we have currently in force EU MRV and IMO DCS regulations, and upcoming in the next years, the UK MRV regulation, the EEXI, carbon intensity indicator, and the enhanced SEM. There are also voluntary initiatives from Poseidon Principles of financial institutions, Sea Cargo Charter of charterers, flag administration's incentives, and other environmental incentives or initiatives. Also, corporate strategies for enhanced compliance and performance, because there is a tendency of people to use more environmentally friendly ships. So the bottom line is that all of these requirements do not have to be a burden. They can be simultaneously met if there is a certain standardized way of reporting and analyzing the data. So this is what can be achieved through digitalization. Digitalization means a standard way of reporting, either on a daily basis or on a per voyage basis, monthly or quarterly. There is no matter, but it has to be a standardized way able to assist the companies in reporting correct data, verifiable data, and along with the necessary supporting documentation for each entry. So this is something for companies to consider, because the regulations are not actually a burden, but an opportunity to introduce into their company operational measures that will have huge benefits towards the company itself. I want to close with the message that when addressing any specific challenges or problems related to efficiency management within your organizations or for any specific projects, always make sure to revisit definitions of technology and innovation, because the deep understanding of technology capabilities and the potential technology synergy utilization will be key to an effective and efficient approach. So technology is what provides the means to address and solve a specific challenge or problem, but innovation, it makes use of technology or synergies between the technologies for more effectively and efficiently addressing and solving a specific challenge or problem. So to be effective leaders within your organizations on ships' energy efficiency issues, you need to be aware of the available technologies, their capabilities and limitations, and be capable of thinking innovatively for establishing those competitive advantages that will separate the organization from competition. So digitalization is the way. The new regulations are not a burden, are actually an opportunity. Thank you very much. I'm at your disposal for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mihalis, for your great presentation. I think we have been well informed on the latest application of the new regulations on enhancing after the MEPC 76 and also the carbon intensity indicator and the EEXI. Thank you for this very good presentation. And now we will open a space for a Q&A, since we have received some from our audience. I would like to address you. The first one is, based on your experience, what are the main challenges and opportunities in applying the new regulations after the MEPC 76?
A very useful question, a very important one. The main thing for each company is to understand the needs of itself first and of the regulation compliance later, because the establishment of a corporate strategy and policies in order to meet the regulations will ultimately lead to the better efficiency of the vessels of the company. So it's something not to be taken lightly, as is being usually done in shipping. It has to be taken into great consideration on how to utilize these reporting requirements, reducing the burden, having a way to respond to the requirements without too much burden, effort, or cost, and at the same time make use of all the potential benefits this effort of the crew will have, because the crew will for sure go the effort to collect the data, to provide the data, to verify the data through the verifier. So this data should be utilized by the company not only for compliance, but also for improving the overall ship or fleet performance.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The second question is, can you explain the difference between digitalization and digitization?
Of course. This is actually an explanation coming from a definition. So digitization is actually converting into digits certain available data sets or processes. So digitization is just transforming that something that exists in hard copy into digital. Digitalization, on the other hand, is a whole different thing. Digitalization means to convert whole procedures into managing the overall processes. So in the case of the regulations, the data monitoring, collection, continuous analysis, calculations, everything are optimized. In digitization, we just would convert the standard reporting into an electronic one. Digitalization goes far beyond.
Okay, thank you. And last question is your advice in terms of education and training. What are the digital components to improve the skills of a person in this era of digital shipping industry?
The basic skills are no different than the rest of the industry is also following. So you have to have the basic knowledge of computers. However, there are nowadays specific systems that can be used. All more or less are specific ones. However, my personal advice to anybody involved in this business is to try to keep track what kind of technologies are being used and what is behind the technologies that are being implemented in the daily or operational reporting of the ships reports analysis, and the environmental reporting of the ships. So this will give a very much greater understanding of what are the processes, what are the procedures. From that point on, is simply knowing the standard functions of computers to utilize any tool that is available in the market.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Mihalis, for your great presentation. As we have completed the session of question and answer for this presentation, we would like to present you as a token of appreciation and for your remarkable presentation, this certificate of recognition on behalf of the International Maritime University of Panama and the Maritime Technology Cooperation Center for Latin America. Thank you very much for your great support to the university as well as the MTCC Latin America.
Thank you very much, and keep on the good work there in MTCC Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Only for general reference, naval architect Michalis Agapiou has been one of also the active supporters of the let's say the MTCC Latin America since its inception, since the beginning, and also one of the main external supporters that help in the development of the pilot project 1 and the pilot project 2 that you can get from the MTCC Latin America website. So all the studies and the analysis, he helps a lot in the development of this pilot project. So we are thankful with the engineer Michalis Agapiou, which is still it's willing to cooperate with the university and the MTCC Latin America.
Hello, everybody, again. Now we're continuing with the presentation for the third speaker. We're going now to present Mr. Alexis Rodriguez. Now he's coming together with us in the meeting. Now we start make a short view of Mr. Alexis. He began his career as an ordinary seaman in an international service vessel. He obtained his degree in law and political science with great honors. He held a master in maritime law, maritime business administration, and ports. He also have an MBA from Inkai Business School and a postgraduate in maritime energy from the World Maritime University in Malmö, Sweden. In the public sector, he was a head of compliance and environmental department at the Panama Maritime Authority and was the former director of the international affairs from the National Environmental Authority. He was a professor of the international law and international convention on maritime issues, pollution, sustainability, and climate change, and was the part of the Panama team that was passed without non-conformity by the IMO audit in Panama in 2008. Currently, he works as an environmental protection specialist at the Panama Canal Authority, seeking to strengthen the organizational environmental policies to promote the Panama Canal routes as the green routes of the environmental international maritime trade. Now, with you, we present our friend Alexis Rodriguez with the topic, the green routes to reduce the CO2 emission and accelerate the decarbonization process. Hello, Mr. Alexis.
Good morning to everyone. Sorry for, well, actually for the delay. Was quite difficult, but this happened when this live event. So also thank you for the MTCC and the university. I think this is really important to everyone to keep update. This is a series of different workshops that we began a few months ago in the same line to keep update everyone about the negotiations, the process that we are dealing outside in different organizations about what is the future about carbon neutral, descarbonization, and an update about the MEPC 76. As you know, this is a quite complicated negotiations and dialogues because of the pandemic. And being in this side, you know, and teams or these technologies is quite difficult to really understand what we need to look forward. But we are making something interesting. So I will present a little bit what is happening now in the negotiations. Also, what we need, for example, as a country, with all the support of the stakeholders to look forward how we can keep going in this negotiation. Erwin, is the presentation is good? Erwin?
Yeah, we can see your presentation, Mr. Alexis.
The first thing that I want to remark is that I always begin with my presentations with different topics of the month. So yesterday at least at 5 a.m. began the launch of the European Maritime Transport Environmental Report. So it was a really nice presentation. They talk about different topics, but the most important part, and I recommend you everyone that read and make a little analysis about this report, because this report is one of the results of a big key player in descarbonization and negotiations in IMO. So they have a remarkable outline of all the environmental impacts from the shipping industry. As you know, now we are talking about emissions, new technologies, and environmental from the descarbonization perspective. However, we need to see all the regulations, all these aspects in a big way, in a big ball that we need to analyze. For example, how are going the other regulations such as ballast water, such as fuel compliance, IMO 2020. And in that way, I want to remark something that in Panama was a good example of how we can do things. For example, the IMO 2020 regulation, when we implement that in November 19 to 2019, was a good experience because we share with everyone and we work together to implement this regulation. So I hope that these kind of examples will be replied for the future, that we involve everyone. So this is a good document, read it. I make a benchmark yesterday in the morning. It was really nice. I see a lot of things that we are doing that I have in my mind. So this is a good reference paper to analyze and to take something like a good analysis. As I began all my presentations, I said, when you are talking about transport, maritime transport, you need to focus or understand that we have different organizations around the world. That we don't have only one organization. We have, for example, a maritime organization, we have United Nations Climate Change Convention organization, we have the UNTAC, the Transport and Development, Oceans, and other organizations that are involved in different of these concepts. So that is the first recommendation that I give you. When you make an analysis or an economic assessment or a technical assessment, we need to see the big picture, because it's not only technical. When we are talking about descarbonization, it's more than technical, but we can talk about technical issues. So that, and we will talk during this presentation, but my advice is always to see all, because, for example, ports and canals are not included in the Annex 6 of Part 4, but there is a resolution that motivates and suggests ports that make the development to achieve the clean vessels. And that is the future. The ports, canals, and all the logistics sector will need to be aligned with the same technologies of the vessels, because at the end, they need to mix and make the same, going on the same way. Because if you have a clean vessel and you don't have a clean infrastructure, you will not be allowed to give that service. And so in that way, we need to understand that it's really important to see what happens in different organizations. That is my maybe 12 years negotiation experience that I could share to you. The other part that I want to address is that it's really important to understand the framework. And when I say the framework is, I'm sorry for the size, but I want that everyone see the big picture. Because sometimes we limit, and that is happening, that is for humans, that we limit in some periods. But we need to go ahead and see all the history of the regulation, why they are implemented, and you will understand the present and the future. And that is another advice that I could tell you. That is really important, and this is an update PDF of IMO that you can find on the web, or I could share the link, that they want to show why we have this kind of regulation at this stage, but what are the roadmap to the next regulation that our technical partners present today, that the CEI, Carbon Intensity Index, and the Energy Efficiency for Existing Ship Index. So that is really important. Understand why, how they burn, what are the programs, what are the regulations, the change between the rules. This is something important. In addition, what we need to learn is that our vessels around the world, they could be applied different regulations depending on the time they are on the shipyard. So that is something interesting, that to understand the big picture. So we can see, for example, different regulation from, I remember when was the approval of the EDI and SEMP in IMO, was one of the parts that was adopted in boats. And you know that the IMO decisions are in consensus, or they try to be in consensus. That was a tough negotiation at that time. So this is really important to understand the framework, because now we can see, for example, for the future, why they changed the EDI phase 3 of if we want to see, for example, the vessels. I remember when that regulation entered in force, the vessels that was the new vessels thinking future, and they say, okay, if we have a EDI phase 2, we should deliver that vessel compliant for 5-10 years in the future. And that is something, or someone criticized, for example, the EDI, that say that most of the vessels now, the new vessels, comply with that. After the regulation entered in force in 2013. That is really important, because that are the key for example, the adoption of the EDI phase 3 and the other regulations that are entering in force. The same also is really important, because when entering in force, the same applies to all the vessels, not only the ones that are after the entry in force, but also to the previous vessel, because that is going with the IEA International Energy Efficiency Certificate, that is an obligatory certificate on board the vessel. So you could have no EDI number because doesn't apply the rule, but you should have the same. And how that will be something interesting for the present and future, how we, the CEI and EXI, will support or make that power of enforcement to the same. Because the same, as you know, is a plan that is, as they present our partners, is really interesting because it's the management, is how we do it. And that is really interesting. But in the other part, is interesting to understand different programs that are going forward to try to implement these rules. This is another tip. When you have a new regulation, you will have, for sure, a program for technical cooperation, for support to the states, and also for mostly for the development states. And that is really interesting to understand, because as the maritime transport is global, we need to have the same rules worldwide. And that is the importance of technical cooperation. The next steps. The next steps, I think that is really important to understand that, for example, we need as such as make big analysis in research and development around worldwide. How we can, for example, make more investment in this area in our countries will be a key player, because we need to understand what are the new technologies, the new fuels, the new trends that the vessels are applying. The reason it's important to read the reports, study them, and if we have the opportunity to make pilot projects about that, that is the only way to keep forward. And that a good example of that is the pandemic. Thanks to research and development, we have today the vaccine. So that's important. The second point, but this, I think that this is the first one, is the human element. This month, we celebrate the International World Maritime Day. And the objective is seafarers as a key player around the world in safety, security, but important in maritime protection. And that is really, really important. Why? Because the environment, you could have the best technology by research and development, but if you don't have a human element that understands that technology, could apply, but in addition, have that culture, that will be complicated. And for the students that are now in the university, that is, you need to keep update. When you are going out from the university, you will see new regulations. You will see new equipment that maybe they change during the process. So keep update. That is my first recommendation. Digital transformation, that is the key, because most of the research and development and the mix with the human element should be reported, should be monitored, and should be analyzed by that digital transformation. We will take out all the paperwork, we will take out all the delays and administrative boundaries, as we call in IMO, because of the digital transformation. And that is something that, for example, in our case, we make for the fuel compliance in the Panama Canal. we have the fuel compliance site, we have the fuel compliance email. We receive all the BDNs and the requests of fuel compliance through the BUMPA, that is a single window of Panama. And we have all the data of different certificates through the same portal that is the BUMPA. And that is an example of how we can make a digital transformation for compliance and implementation of this kind of rules. Fuels. Each day we will have a study that talks about the different fuels. And that is interesting to understand that in addition to have fuels, we need to have an infrastructure for that fuels and the capacity to give to that vessel that are changing their fuels that opportunity. And that the only way is to keep update and understand how they are moving, because all the fuels are moving for carbon neutral at the first stage and then to zero carbon. And that is on the resolution of the IMO for the strategy that should be revised, yes, in the next year. New technologies will be the key point. Now we are talking about carbon capture, about the emissions, about the CO2, about the SOx, the scrubbers. You will see more type of these equipment, but it's important to understand how they work. It's really nice to see it on paper, on a report, on a study. And that is the reason that we go on board different vessels to check that technologies, to ask for the type approvals, for ask when you are applying, and this is really important in this kind of issues, when you are talking about new technologies and you have on board a vessel, they should be calibrated also. So that is something that we are asking. And for the next steps, as a country, we are trying to work in something that we call the NAPS, that is the National Voluntary Action Plans. That is really important that that National Action Plan from Panama as a country should reflect all the good practice of the country, all the enhancements that we are making in all the different points that are reflected from MEPC 76. As our partner said, that is the technical part, for example, CEI and EXI. But these points are the willing process. There is something that I don't add here, because that is a big discussion and negotiation globally, that we are talking about the fuel levy, fuel taxes, and I think that this should be for another type of webinar. But these points are really important to understand. When we are talking about national action plans, it's really important to understand to everyone that the Panama Canal take the decision to announce the transition to become carbon neutral by 2030. That is a big commitment when we are talking about different measures, because when we are talking about carbon neutral, the first thing is that we are putting in the same level of the global organizations related to the maritime transport, taking into account that we will give value added to our customers that transit through the canal, and also making the steps to going forward to change and have a cleaner operations. But when we are talking about carbon neutral, it's important to understand that it's giving more efficiency, giving more reductions, and then offsetting our emissions by or before 2030. So this is a big step that should be reflected in international organizations, and how Panama are taking the lead of these things, such as European or Asian companies that are making this kind of advance. Also, in addition, Panama is a neutral country in carbon. We call carbon positive because of the conservation of our forests. So this is our things that we need to promote in that national action plans. As we continue with our strategy, planning or including all the concepts that are going to for MPC, analyzing and taking into account all the information for our customers. Remember that we receive more than 12,000 vessels, so we need to understand and realize that they have different technologies, different fuels, and different characteristics and operational measures. So we will continue in that sense, giving that support to the global industry and giving that global effort to reduce emissions, not only from our customers, but also from our operations, comply with the environmental commitment of a sustainable management of the canal watershed. Giving that opportunity to all the world to continue that global requirements that we don't only have for IMO. We have a global commitment from the Paris Agreement to maintain 1.5 limits that are the global objective. Giving more regulation, looking forward for a clean air, also for the sustainable development goals, looking for more air quality, reducing the GHG emissions, and a process of descarbonization. And we continue with our best practice that should be reflected in that national action plan, and that we continue presenting to all the different organizations, and how we can give that capacity building and good experience of how a country like Panama are putting their efforts to comply to the objective. You know why? Because I see, and you can see in the report that I present, that there are more and more options that the Northern Sea Route opens because of the sea levels of the ice that is not more in the Arctic. So we need to continue to protect not only the environment, but also the oceans, that is really important for our biodiversity. With that, I want to end as a big review of if you want to see, for example, what we are talking about is not regulation, but we are talking about all the next steps that are included in the strategy. But the most important part is not about a document, it's not about a resolution that approves that, or an Annex 6 report, is how we can do it, and how we will apply that rules, how we understand the type of vessels, how the customers and the vessels are taking these technologies. This is really important to understand that the regulations is one of the steps of what we need to understand. Behind of me, I want to, this background is a very new vessel, more than 50,000 TEUs that transit through the canal with the scrubbers, with a ballast water treatment system, with all the measurements and monitoring, digitalizing that they have on board. And that is a good example. For example, when we go on board, we check and we learn from our vessels also how they are keeping updated using all the concepts, fuels, technologies, digital transformation, but the most important part and the reason to be here, the human element. Thank you.
Oh, thank you a lot, Mr. Alexis, for your grateful presentation about how it's about the issuers at MEPC, all the meetings that we are together, and also how the Panama Canal are working to contribution of the maritime transportation to transit the transition of the decarbonization, yeah, and how the Panama Canal help all the shipping industry. Now, we want to introduce us to make for you some question answering for the people. We have one question for one of the participants. The question is, what is the impact of the pandemic and the economic crisis that generate a global trade and the compromise for the Panama Canal Authority contribute to the carbon neutral in 2030?
I think this is a mixed question. I could answer in two ways. The first one is that when you are talking about the carbon neutral, this is you need to be entering first in a planning process. This is the best part of everything. You need to plan. Most of the companies that we study outside and make a benchmark about the study that fail in these issues are the companies that doesn't plan, that they only set a commitment. We are planning in that stage. For this year, we are making all the analysis, all the studies that we launch in a few weeks. Also, we are making all the analysis about the footprint. That is really important, is understand what is your footprint. And we are calculating that maybe like 8 years ago, we are calculating our CO2 footprint. And that will be the future for the vessels. And in the pandemic, in the maritime transport, when you see that picture is, for example, all the maritime transport are continuing. We have the goods today because of the maritime transport. And that should be recognized everywhere. And that is the reason that we are seeing the topic for the World Maritime Days, the seafarers, because they are contributing to continue the logistic and all the transport of goods around the world. So for another sectors, the pandemic should be like a tip year. For the maritime transport, is like we continue everywhere. So the carbon footprint, continue the measurements, the implementation, the compliance, thanks to God, that is something interesting that we implement all the digital transformation in our compliance methods for the sulfur content in 2020. So that helps us a lot when we implement that regulation. We receive all the information by the BUMPA, that is single window. So that was before the pandemic. So in that 3 months before. So at this stage, we are making the analysis, and this is a good compliance method. We are making more analysis, but I resume everything in planning. First, to understand the economics of the environment, you need to plan and analyze and make all the analysis before you thinking some technologies, some fuels. You need to plan what you want and realize where you are.
Okay, Mr. Alexis, very nice answer for the question generated by the participants. We have many questions now for the participant here. One of you mentioned in your presentation, you're talking about the National Action Plan to address the greenhouse gas emission from ships. You can talk to us. We can contribute by the Panama Canal Authority and all the part involvement to bring to Panama come to carbon neutrals. We can make a national policy or green policy to implement it in the Panama region, in the Panama country, and also we can suggest to the whole region to implement the same national policy for greener and safety environmental work. Please.
Could you repeat? I can.
Yeah. According with the MEPC, the 75, we mentioned about the assumption of the National Action Plan to address our greenhouse gas emission from ships. How we can contribute it? Panama adopted the national policy or national strategy to reduce the greenhouse emission and bring to Panama to neutral carbon.
Well, this is two different. The commitment of the carbon neutral is from the Panama Canal. The environmental minister, they have a program that they call Reduce tu Huella, that is for 2050. So we make a commitment 20 years before the national commitment that is on the NDCs. And there is a difference from for example, for the National Action Plan. When you are talking about National Action Plans, as the resolution said from IMO that I presented, is important to understand that these all the commitments from the country. Country has all the responsibilities from port state, flag state, and coastal state that is under the UNCLOS Convention. So in that way, it's important to remark all the contribution. And I said, for example, my recommendation will be or should be identify 5 points. Quite important points that we are making that enhancement. For example, the first one, as I said, the human element, how we are, the academia are getting involved in that. And so we congrats what you are doing. And on all the other universities or programs that are enforcing and promoting this kind of issues. The second part is how we are advanced in digital transformation for that, for emissions, for these contributions. The other for stakeholders, how we can use all the good practice of the stakeholders around the country to reflect that our country have a national policy to promote these issues, and then you can go to different stakeholders and take good practice, such as the Panama Canal, that we can share that. So that is really important because at the IMO now we have at least 3 countries that have presented that national action plan. So that is really nice because that will be the roadmap on how we are trying to achieve all the international goals. Because when we are talking about a big picture, we need to understand that the goals are from IMO in one part, but that is for vessels. The goals are specific for vessels, not for all the transport, as I said in the beginning. And we have other international goals that are the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that we include oceans, we include climate, and other SDGs. And we have also the United Nations Climate Change Convention goals. So in that way, when we mix all the goals together, I think that we will have a lot to show as a country. And that is something that we are working together with our authorities, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we're working that, to reflect all the points and the good practices we are doing as a country. When you see my experience, I read all the days different newspapers, magazine, research documents from all around the world. We are doing a lot of things. Yesterday, when I was checking the report from the ENSA, I was, wow, in Panama, we are doing a lot of things that are reflected and we participate for that kind of organization. For example, the Environmental Chip Index. Panama participated in that. We recognize vessels giving environmental chip index and was in the report yesterday. We are planning for carbon neutral and we are planning for descarbonization, and that is on the report. We are making research and development and giving these reports about the meetings that we participate as the MEPC 76 as observer, and that is part of the report. So we are doing things. Now we need to reflect that. And when you are talking about environment, it's complicated because it's not, you don't have a book of environmental economics or how to environmental marketing. You need to, day by day, implement this, explain to the people, but most important, take all on board. This is the only way that we can achieve these goals. Take all on board and talk in the same language and explain how we need to do it.
Very good answer, Mr. Alexis. That was excellent, because that's meaning that we have to working together, all, involved to contribute at the reduce the greenhouse emission, not only from ships but only from transportation sectors, and we are including that. This is the way to contribute is involve everybody to make an action plan on national action plans. According with your experience, what are the best practice implemented in the Panama Canal to contribute in the decarbonization transition? We are now in the transition, really, because now the transition just start.
We are in the most important part of the process, planification, and that is something that would sometimes have been forgotten in other industries. And we continue planning, and this is the most important part, because when you are planning, you identify the stakeholders, you identify everyone, you identify, for example, the scope, what you want to do, and that is like a project. This kind of thing is like a project, and then is really important to understand the timeline that you can make the things, mix the technology and research and development. You need to know, that's really amazing, because you need to know more than different type of vessel that are transit. You need to need everyone. What types are transit, which vessel, which fuel, what fuel we use also, and what technologies could be used, depending on the technical, of the safety measures, and also the environmental measures. That is something that when we talk about descarbonizations and carbon neutral, that is something really important. And that happens in IMO. When you are taking a new regulation, you need to send also to Maritime Safety Committee, because they need to check that they don't comply with the SOLAS rules. And that is the same when you are trying to implement this kind of thing. Sometimes I get, sometimes people say, hey, you are like a green guy, like Hulk. And they say, no, you know, the next, and that is something I could say to the alumni in the universities, most of the more important carriers for the future will be sustainability and environmental related things. You can imagine how you can imagine all the companies should need to do this in the future, not now, but in the future. So these things of sustainability involve economics, finance, accountability, project management, everything. And that is really important. But now we are in that stage. That stage, we are some steps. You need to verify, identify, planify, and then you implement. But this is really important. But also in another, we are planning more for that capacity building, giving more the basic concepts. You can imagine when we talk about carbon neutral and descarbonization around different meetings or conference, most of the people mix the concepts. Think that when you are getting carbon neutral is because you will eliminate all the CO2, and that is not true. You are getting more efficient and then compensate that carbon. And when you are descarbonization, then you are thinking in the mid and long term planning for eliminate the CO2, and that will be the future work. I can close with that. That is something that many things, many of the technical guys sometimes doesn't understand. the ones that are making pressure to this kind of measures are the final customer. These 2 weeks, and you can read that different newspapers and logistic magazines, that the big retailers, H&M, IKEA, Amazon, yesterday was a strike or was a protest outside that office in the United States, because that retailers are the ones that are pressing to be more sustainable. And at the end, who are the guys that are making the pressure? The final customer. And that is the reason that I come back for the first slide. And what is the first slide? That you need to understand all the organizations and the objective to implement this kind of measures. This is a global issue that are all pressing everyone to give that value added. And we are getting prepared for that, making the most important part of a process of implementation, the planification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexis. This is a nice word that you say about the process that we are in the process of the planification, yeah, to go to the carbonization process. That's very good for us to you be there with us. You know, you are now you are very grateful to give to you some certificate of recognition for your excellent participation in this webinar. But we want to continue working in that kind of project because we are thinking the human resource have to know what is the new regulation and new regulation to go to implement it. Not only in the ship, it's all involved in the maritime sector, in the maritime industry. All we have to know about the new rules, and this is the good way that when the MTCC Latin America try to work together with all the stakeholders to teach and to learn to everybody about these new regulations. We are now going to bring to you a certificate of recognition. Thank you, Mr. Alexis. Now we present to you the certificate of recognition to Alexis as taking your participation for your remarkable as a speaker in this webinar. Thank you, and we want to continue working together for the next technical issues with the Panama Canal Authority and also with all the parties involved in that process of to bring the shipping industry to the carbonization, and also in all the Latin American region. Thank you, Mr. Alexis.
Thank you for inviting me to this series of different webinars that began months ago. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot. We will see you soon. Have a nice day, Mr. Alexis. Now we are going to continue with the webinar. Of the next subject that also is very important to know about the next topic, because it's a topic are very important to everybody to understand what is the EEXI and how is the difference between EEDI and EEXI. This is something that the people have to know, but many example for us, we are seafarers, but when the people go on board, they don't know how we calculate it, or they know, but they have to understand how is this transition, what is the different kind of ships, different calculation, because a calculation is not the same from one ship, it's a different kind of ship, and they have to know how they come in. For deck and engine department and ETO, this is also important. Also for all the career involved in that kind, like marine transportations, also the naval construction, biology, because also they have to know about the emission, because we use a technology like a scrubber to reduce the emission, and they go to the sea, and this is also we have to know. In this time, we want to introduce our next participants in the future. We want to say about what is the path of decarbonization. To understand that decarbonization come to the amendment of the MARPOL Annex 6. In the Annex 6, we have two requirements that we are talking about here, in the EEXI and CII. In the CII, we already explained with Edilberto Peralta, and now our next speaker going to explain about the EEXI. In that time, we are going to know if somebody want to make a question in the next presentation. Please just only write in the chat of the group of the webinar and make a question. We receive all the questions and we bring the question for the speakers that they make you answer. Anything we are continue with the next speaker. We have present some video of the DNV. DNV is one of the stakeholders that we are working together.
Expert hubs work around the clock to solve cases without going on board. The level of assurance is the same as a traditional onboard survey. Your benefits: class compliance with no or minimal disruption to operations, no travel time or costs, no waiting time, faster inspections with the same level of assurance as onboard surveys, global access to specialized experts 24/7. Documentation is available immediately after the survey. Crews can prepare for remote surveys in a few simple steps. On DNV's online portal, My Services on Veracity, you can check whether your issue could be surveyed remotely. Remote surveys can be offered for occasional surveys that fall between periodical inspections, documentation-based surveys, testing and witnessing systems during normal operations, surveys not ordered together with annual surveys. DNV's remote surveyors work in teams and consult a network of specialized technical experts to solve complex issues.
Hello, everybody. Now We want to share now the next speaker. This is the last speaker of the presentation of the webinar. The Captain Antonio Prestigiacomo. He is a business development manager and head of America Maritime Academy, Region America, driving a strategic business development initiative. The result of enhancement of maritime industry performance. Captain Antonio is an accomplished professional with over 25 years of demonstrated leadership experience obtained across the maritime industry. He has a multitude of experience, including maritime engineer and related technology, along with a strong emergency response skill. Highly adept at leading vessel operation include all aspects of emergency response, shipboard stability, safety, crew leaderships, voyage planning, navigation, fire and safety, maintaining high-level credentials with the maritime industry, including the professional qualification of merchant marine, captain, and chartered marine engineer. Offering subject matter experience with many years involvement on leading consultant project, IMO, and industry ad hoc working group, and specialist initiatives to support the vessel operation and maritime business development. Now, we are going to present the topic of Mr. Antonio Prestigiacomo. This is one of the partners of this MTCC Latin America, with the topic that he's going to present, EEXI, energy efficiency existing ship index calculation. Now, Mr. Antonio, please.
Good morning. Do you see me?
Here, yeah? Mr. Antonio, we can see you.
You can hear me as well? Good. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thanks for inviting me, and the DMV. I really appreciate these partnerships with you, Captain Erwin, and the MTCC. I think is essential for our futures of our maritime world. So you want to share, please, the presentation?
If you want, we can share your presentation. I just
yes, please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Within some minutes. Just coming. Just coming.
But in a while you are trying to share the presentation. So I can start to talk. Don't worry, we can start to talk. Yes. So then, anyway, everyone knows already ENV, right? So we are a classification societies, but also we feel that we are an organization that managing risk, are supporting the maritime industry together with the other industries, such the energy industry, oil and gas. So it's a worldwide organization covering the full globe with more than 12,000 vessels, covering about the 20% of gross tonnage of the full fleet. So at the moment, what we do, we are supporting the maritime industry, especially in directions of the futures or at present decarbonizations and digitalization. So the agenda for today will be to talk about regulatory and stakeholders outlooks, how we can achieve compliance with the greenhouse gas regulations issued by IMO, discussing the EEXIs, what is, How do you calculate what are the relevant consequences? So how is impacting the maritime industry? And further step to consider or to implement in order to continue these greenhouse gas regulations compliance. Can you go please to the next slides, the other slides, please? The slide number 4. Thank you. So in this graph, what we have? We have the IMO strategy of greenhouse gas emissions from now till 2100 and 2050 and 2100. What you can see here is we identify short-term actions that we will consider, mid-term and long-term. So first of all, what is our object? To arrive to 2050 and use by 50% on carbon. In 2018 and 2023, what we are doing? We have implemented the EED, so the energy efficiency design indicators. We have implemented the SIMS, so the shifts energy efficiency management plan. We have identified the energy efficiency indicators. We are implementing further speed mid-term between 2030. We will have the further energy efficiency measures to be implemented for new and existing ships using new indicators, while for long term is clear that in long term so we will have to develop carbon neutral or zero carbons fuels. So from now on, as you see, we are planning to design factors for ships, operational factors such as speed, but long term we will need to define new fuels that allow us to eliminate any carbon emissions. So the carbon neutral carbon fuels. In these graphs, what you can see the green trajectory, so the green Erwin, sorry, do you still see me? Because I lost you a little bit.
Yeah, we can see you and we can hear you. Yeah.
Erwin?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
So I continue. So then, okay, thank you to confirm. So then we have the green. Okay, so the green line is the emissions pathways that I want according to our greenhouse strategy. How do we get there? Through these factors and that I have mentioned before. The means these will allow us to achieve the takeoff of IMO. If we remain as we are now, as you can see, the emissions will go up and up, so we will never stop. So then this is in blue between the two lines is the emission gap that we will need to earn through our actions and compliance with applicable requirements. Next slide, please. Erwin, next slide, please. Thank you. So we had lately the MEPC 76. The regulations that we have adopted are the EXI. So what is the EXI? EXI is energy efficiency indicator applied to existing vessels, while the EEDI was the energy efficiency designs indicators applied to new buildings. In the next slides, we will see how the EEXI is calculated and how we can compare to the EE. So we have the new regulation to implement carbon intensity indicator, the CII. The EEXI regulations will enter into force on November 1st, 2022, and they will be effective of January 1st, 2000. In the meantime, group at times a development group that are working to further initiatives. Then, complying with the EEXI, that should not be hard works. I believe so in what we are seeing is that through the support to the maritime industry that organizations as the DMV is giving, we really will not be hard works, will not be a big challenge. Yes, there will be an impact to the maritime industry and how we do business now. But if we plan everything in times, starting from and obtain the right support from the right expert, implementing the right applicable energy efficiency technology, we will do it. We will achieve these goals. So the EEXIs, is depending from the EEDI applicable for the type of vessel. And if you can see in these tables, for ship types, we have indicated the required EEXI. The required EEXI is just obtaining, reducing the applicable EEDIs of the percentage that you can see in this column. So if we look at vessels, right now that the vessels, how we achieve the required EEXIs, or through limitations of the engine powers, or changing the fuels and retrofitting the energy, or perhaps if we will not be able to do this with operations and the new technology, then we will need to replace the existing vessels with new vessels. So the new requirement with regard to EEXIs are not prescriptive, but are goal-based, because we can achieve the goal prescribed, reducing the engine power, changing the fuels, and as I said, retrofit the engine. We will have goals implementing whatever is more applicable to our type of business and types of ships. What do we need to do? We need to calculate the EEXI and prepare the technical file, submit these calculations and this technical file to the class of your vessels. Upon verifications and survey, then you will receive the new EEC, so International Energy Efficiency Certificate. Next slide, please. Erwin, next slide, please. Thank you. Next one. Yes. So then we have the EEXIs with we understood that the EXI, because it's related to the EDI, so then is related to what? To the designs of the vessel. This picture, is telling you really in a easy way what we are trying to do. The EXIs related to the types of a vessel, design of the vessel, engine types of vessel, while the CII is an operational in indicators. So whatever we will do, how we will run engines, our fuel consumptions and the speed will affect the CII. So one, the EXI is a design indicators. The other one is an operational indicators. Next slide, please. Erwin, next slide. Thank you. So in these slides, what we have around 47 vessels where we have identified in black the So here we will have all these 47 vessels. The black remarks are regarding the required EXI. As we know, there are vessels that have an available EDI. Some other vessels, they don't have their available EDI. So then calculations of the EXIs should be based on the data that we will build or in the EU MRB. So as you can see, there will be several vessels that we will achieve the applicable, required EXIs, other vessels that we will not. So then they will need to act accordingly. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some examples of calculation of EXIs. So where we can see, considering the different types of vessels, and their powers, what they need to do. So for MCR, we intend is the maximum power output of the engine. So the maximum the engine can. So this vessel is a container vessel built in 2015 as an NCR of 58,000 kilowatt. To this NCR of 58,000 kilowatt, there is a related speed. If we want that these vessels satisfy the applicable EXIs, we will need to implement an engine powers limit. In this case, will be 47,500 kilowatt, the new MCR. And as you can see, considering the speed profile of the vessel, should not be affected by the new MCR. Next slide, please. So we will have situations where even if you apply the EPL, your vessel still can maintain an engine power and a speed that will allow the vessel to continue the business as normal. For example, in this case, we have a vessel, a bulk carrier built in 2017, and then initial MCR was of 8,000 kilowatt. With that MCR, we will not need to do any actions. Each size related is satisfied, so the ships is good to go and to continue their business without any further change. Next slide, please. Thank you. In this case, we have an oil tankers, 109,000 deadweight. As you can see here, we will need, in order to satisfy the applicable size, we will need to have an engine, to apply an engine power limit. To this engine power limit, we will have a new MCR that will be of 11,000 kilowatt. To this 11,000 kilowatt, we have a speed of about 13.8 knots. Therefore, the vessels will be affected by this new EPR. But in that case, we have to see how much the new speed will affect the trading route of the vessels. Yes, it's affected, but if the operational schedules around their trading route that we are performing, vessel will comply with the size, will support the decarbonization goal, and will continue to do business. So what is important is to try to find a compromise with all these aspects. We will save the want to support business well. Absolutely. Yeah. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to sum up, what we can do to have to attain, the required EX size, to satisfy the required EX size. If the EX size at the moment you have calculated for your vessel is less than the required EX size, so then you are good to go. You have to submit your EXI technical file and your EXI calculations to the classification society of the vessel. They will review, they will approve, and they will organize a relevant survey in due time for the emission of the IE certificate. It's clear that the DMV can support you in the calculations of the EXIs and the preparations of the technical file as well. And as I can show you in the next slides, you will see that we have available C2 calculator tools, preparations of the technical file tools in our portal. If your attained EXI is more than the required EXI, so then we say we have to work to limit the engine power. If this doesn't affect too much your business, your trading route, or we can optimize the hull design, optimize the propulsion, or we can optimize the engine through the use of alternative fuels or conversion, retrofitting of the engine, or implementing new innovative energy efficiency technology that we have various, so new fuel, you could be supported by cells, by battery, by fuel cells. There is a lot of discussions at the moment. Just yesterday we released our outlook energy for 2050, and I believe it's good if you go in our website and have access to it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as we says, we have EEXI to satisfy by entering force from January 2023, but in the meantime, we will have the CIIs, to satisfy with times. How this compliance, could be achieved, we say is already, through limitations of the engine powers or through the optimizations, propellers, or the engine. For sure, at the beginning, everyone is going to look to the EPL, but I believe not all the vessels they will achieve the EEXI goals or the CII goal through an EPL, only EPL. Please, the next slide. Thank you. This is a sort of regulatory times lines. We started last November 2020. You can see on January 2023, we will need to approve the approved business, and CII will becomes effective. After January 1st, 2023, we will need to have the size verified by the first IFPP survey certifications. And what is important that from March 31st, 2024, so our first season ready to be issued specs. How you because already can support as advisories, so helping you to calculate these EEXIs. But in the meantime, when we are at the class of your vessels, we can certify the calculation that you prepared and verifies your technical file. If you need support with that, you can always send an email to this email address, eexi@dmv.com, or if you have access to our fleet status portal, you can send a query to DATE, that means digital access to technical expertise, or you can contact your regional DMV point of contact. In this case, for Panama, Central America, and the Caribbean, and the Southeast of the States will be myself. And what I suggest, you go please to this page, www.dmv.com/EEXI, because there you will find all relevant information, details about these applicable requirements, what is next, and how we can support your business and your vessel. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next one, yeah. So then, as I say, we need to start preparing now, any path towards decarbonization. So we need to start now to implement now any actions that will allow us to achieve the decarbonization goals. While are important for the maritime industry, are important for the world and the protections of our child. So our commitment to do that is essential and is essential. So there is more discussions at IMO, and not only IMO, in the States, in South Americas, within European organizations, discussions regarding what to do in order to achieve this decarbonization goal. But in the meantime, how we should support the maritime industry to have this goal satisfied, and in the meantime, in the most optimized, let's say, ways, in order that any impact, to our daily life, to our business, will be, could be absorbed, and could be absorbed, and any impact will not distract our way to support the shipping industry. Next slide, please. So now I want to introduce you our tools that is on DND tools that is available in our portal Veracity Fleet Status, where you can do what you can do. So first of all, this tool is available for all DMV classed vessel. Also, will be available to if you don't have vessel with you, if you require these tools, So through this tool, you can view, you can calculate the EEXI related to your fleet. You can see what is required and what you are attaining. You can have the interfacings with the EPL, relevant EPL, so you can see, okay, this is what is required, this is what achieves. What if I have these reductions of energy powers? What I will be, achieved, what I will be satisfying. Then in the tools, you will give you this view. In the meantime, the tools, we will help you to build the EEXI technical files. So EEXI technical file just with all the relevant details regarding your vessel to verify the class of your vessel. Next slide, please. This is the landing. This is the landing page. Again, it's the landing page that you can see once you have our access to EEXI. So there you will see, you can see that you have a general information about EEXI. You will have a checklist, several links that will obtain access to issues inside the land page. Also, what are the vessels of your fleet that are required to have EEXI? Next slide, please. Yes, if you can continue. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So one is those indicated with the number 1 are general information about EEXI. What is, when is applicable, to which ships is applicable. So remember that the EEXIs apply to all cargo vessels and cruise ships with a gross tonnage above 400 under MARPOL, the vessels that are under MARPOL Annex 6. 2 will give you access to guide and checklist. 3 links with more information about EEXI, all the information that we need to know, to understand how we need to achieve the new requirement. Here in the column indicated by the number 5, you will see all the vessels clustered with DMV within your fleet, if is the case. And on 6, you can see required XI, attended XIs, the difference, and what to do and how to calculate. So here really is a great tool. Is a complementary for vessel clustered with DMV that will allow you to achieve in an easy way, the new requirement. So as I said at the beginning, we want that EXI satisfactions, CI satisfactions is not an hard work, doesn't become hard work, but a simple of operations that could be achieved through our support. Next slide, please. Thank you. It's clear that who is interested to the decarbonization factor, to all these factors, to the emissions, is not only the regulators. So it's not only IMO or the European community, but also bank and charters, bank that are going to support a green way to do business, to do maritime business. So that's why we have the Poseidon principles, and in fact as well the sea cargo charter programs. So as you see, it's in the maritime industries, regulator, charters, and banks are all in the same mood towards, the decarbonization, towards the achievement of the IMO strategy. I really appreciate your attentions, and I apologize if the connections was not that great, but I will invite you to send me any particular query regarding the size, CI, or any innovative energy efficiency technology that you have in mind or you are interested. Just send me an email to this address or call me anytime, and then I will be glad to support you accordingly. Beginning of October, we will do a webinars that we call Sailings with Zero Emissions. These webinars will be related especially to the yacht segment, but I think it's of interest of everyone how hybridizations, so electric powers, and how wind sail can support a propulsion of a vessel. Thank you, Erwin.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Captain Antonio, for your presentation. We have now some question for the audience. The participant, one of the participants, want to ask you about between alternative fuel and energy efficiency technology, which one is the best solution to improve the vessel energy efficiency? You can answer the question.
So, yes, absolutely. So I believe that there is the answer is that every ships for every trading route, then we will need really to identify what is most appropriate. If using alternative fuel, because in the use of alternative fuel, then you need to consider also a retrofit of the engines or modification to the engine. While when we talk about energy efficiency technology, that will be propulsion optimizations, propeller cap, additional energy saving device, those are applicable as well, but they can play together with the alternative fuels, or they can play alone if, in the case, they help the ships to satisfy the EXI. Yeah.
Okie dokie. Thank you, dear Antonio, for your participation and your continuous collaboration with the International Maritime University and the MTCC Latin America. Now we want to give to you for every time support us and contribution of the speaker in that webinar. We give the certification of recognition to Mr. Antonio Prestigiacomo. Thank you a lot, there, Antonio. I hope to see you soon. I hope you visit also your country and to help us to continue contributing with the transition of the decarbonization process in the maritime shipping industry. Thank you, Captain Antonio. I hope to see you.
Thank you, Erwin. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Well, thank very much all the presenters for today. Now the moderators, Engineer Erwin Vargas and Engineer Javier Diaz, are going to give us the summary for the presentations we have had today.
Okay, thank you, Adriana, for your introduction, and also thanks to our last speaker, Captain Antonio, always supporting the MTCC. Well, before we move on, I would like to inform you that we have been sending a message through our chat, so you can, we invite you all to fill out the evaluation form, the webinar evaluation form. It's very short, so we have also your feedback from the activity today, okay? We invite you all to fill out the evaluation form. It's already, the link is already sent through the chat here in the platform, okay? Today we have been, of course, honored by very well-known speakers and also with a good background in maritime, starting from our first speaker from Lloyd Register, Engineer Edilberto Peralta, followed by Naval Architect Mihalis Agapiou, also Alexis Rodriguez, always supporting MTCC as our third speaker, and closing the session with Captain Antonio Prestigiacomo from DNB. It has been, I think, for all of us, has been a good opportunity to learn about the new regulations, the implementation, the process of transition towards the decarbonization in shipping. I think we have been all informed about the new mechanisms, the new strategies that has been implemented to monitor and assess the ship's fuel consumption and subsequent CO2 emissions against transport work over a period of time, with an aim to improve the energy efficiency of a ship and subsequently reduce its environmental footprint. I think we would like also to thank all our attendees, participants, not only from the Latin America region, have been from all over the world, from Bangladesh, India, from Germany, from USA, from Singapore. I think we have guests from all over the world, and also the continuous support from the region and the Caribbean, also the Caribbean region. We're very happy to share this morning this technical knowledge with all of you, including our students of the International Maritime University of Panama. It has been, I think, a good journey this morning, and I will give the word now to Engineer Erwin Vargas for the closing summary of the event. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, the college Javier Diaz, and also the college Adriana Quesada, and also thank you for all all the speaker who stayed with us in this webinar. This webinar is many technical issues that we discuss here in this webinar, but are important to the people start to understand how the shipping industry is going to change. Not now, is already going to change before, but now start in the process of planning, and how we measure that process is to learn how the shipping industry is changing. We want to talk in something about the future work. The future work of the MEPC was to discuss a number of submissions and how the process to the next stage of the IMO work to cut the greenhouse emission from ship, leading to the revision of the initial strategy of the 2023. That's meaning at that time, we have to immediately start to know what is the short term coming on the phase 1 in the work plan, the collision and initial consideration of proposal for measurement starting the spring 2021 to spring 2022. The phase 2 assessment and selection of measurements to future development coming to the spring 2022 to spring 2023. And the phase 3 is a development of a measurement to be finalized within agreed target dates. This is also very important, how the IMO start to make the plan to measure how this new regulation to continuous proposal to meet the term measurement, and after the medium term, the long term. And we are continuing that. Also, if nobody know, we have another proposal of the MEPC was discussed in the meeting 76. The committee had not executive consideration the proposal of the International Maritime Research Board. What's the meaning? We are trying to work in the panel discussion, the panel group of the MEPC, in the working group of the reduction of greenhouse gas emission. We want to say we are continue monitoring how the process is continued development. And all of that kind of information you can share in the IMO webpage about the meeting of MEPC 76 and the future meeting that coming in the meeting 77. And all these measurements have been adopted in the MARPOL Annex 6 about the decarbonization process. Thank you again for all your attention. Thank you for all your participation and to start to understand how the process of the EXI and CII, and also how it's implemented on the ship energy efficiency management plan on board of all the kind of ships. Thank you. Gracias, le decimos a todos los participantes por estar siempre colaborando con el centro y contribuir. Nosotros somos un centro internacional, razón por la cual nuestras presentaciones comúnmente son en inglés y nuestros expositores presentan en inglés, pero igual queremos transmitirle que estamos hacia esa transformación, hacia ese mejoramiento de la industria marítima para reducir las emisiones provenientes de los buques, para reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, como unas políticas que ha implementado la OMI. Nosotros, como ser un centro tecnológico marítimo, estamos enfocados hacia este objetivo. Gracias a todos los participantes.
The closing words for the webinar will be delivered by the President of the International Maritime University of Panama, Víctor Luna Barahona. Las palabras del cierre del webinar van a ser dadas por el rector de la Universidad Marítima Internacional de Panamá, Víctor Luna Barahona.
Muchas gracias, Adriana, y muchas gracias a todos. Disculpen que me adelanté un poquito porque no esperé la versión en español de la introducción. Bueno, muy buenas tardes, bendiciones para todos, y de verdad que para mí es un honor, recibo con mucha gratitud dar las palabras de cierre del webinar. Y por supuesto aprovecho la ocasión para enviar mi más profundo agradecimiento a todos los que participaron en este extraordinario webinar que ha abierto la puerta a un debate de extrema importancia para toda la industria marítima. Por supuesto que con el permiso también me gustaría dar las gracias a todos los panelistas, Antonio, Edilberto, Alexis, Michailis. Muchas gracias. Al igual, dar las gracias a todo el personal de MTCC Latin America, Adriana, que se está sumando el día de hoy. Muchas gracias. Por supuesto, a todo el personal de tecnología y logístico de la Universidad Marítima, a todo el personal. Muchas gracias. Sin lugar a dudas que el mundo está atravesando por cambios radicales y el principal de ellos, y quizás sea el más difícil de cambiar, es la forma de pensar de cada uno de nosotros, de cada uno de los individuos. Nuestros recursos son ilimitados. Por supuesto que no. Administrar nuestras vidas bajo esta creencia ha sido el más grande e histórico error de nuestra sociedad. La contaminación del agua, producto de la concentración de dióxido de carbono en el aire, los devastadores fenómenos meteorológicos, la muerte, migración y extinción de diferentes especies de animales terrestres y marinos, la alteración del ciclo del agua, el aumento del nivel del mar y de la temperatura global a causa del deshielo, el agotamiento de recursos naturales necesarios para la vida, parecieran ser parte del guión de una película del fin del mundo. Pero no lo son. Son hechos que se constituyen en parte de nuestra realidad. Nuestros abusos están afectando a procesos naturales de vital importancia. En el caso de los ecosistemas, los humedales, por ejemplo, están en riesgo de desaparecer. Otro punto importante es la disminución de las precipitaciones, que está creando un caldo de cultivo ideal para los incendios y un tema de mucha polémica, el crecimiento acelerado de nuestra población mundial. Son estos hechos que gritan a voz de cuello para que le escuchemos y tomemos decisiones que contribuyan a encontrar soluciones inmediatas a mediano y largo plazo. Como industria, estamos en la obligación real de modificar la actividad humana de nuestra gente. Irremediablemente, somos parte del problema. Nuestra actividad está alterando la composición de la atmósfera del mundo. Este día se ha explicado con amplia claridad los resultados técnicos aprobados en el Comité de Protección del Medio Marino de la UMIP. A través de las diferentes disertaciones por parte de nuestros expertos, hemos logrado dar respuestas a muchas interrogantes. Cada cual podrá interpretar las disertaciones de la manera más objetiva que les sea posible, pero la realidad es una. Como industria, estamos llamados a ser más eficaces, eficientes y sostenibles, con aquello que la OMI califica como un enfoque combinado, técnico y operativo, para reducir la intensidad del carbono. Las medidas buscan llevar a la industria del transporte marítimo hacia el camino correcto de la descarbonización, un camino largo y pedregoso. Sin embargo, si todas las partes involucradas aportan su grano de arena, podremos cumplir los objetivos de reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero de nuestros buques, con medidas técnicas y operativas combinadas y sustentadas en la seguridad, la sostenibilidad y la rentabilidad de las operaciones, para llegar al 2030 con una reducción mínima del 40% de estos gases. Vamos a seguir fomentando la participación colectiva para combatir el cambio climático. Muchas gracias a todos. Nos hemos comprometido a seguir trabajando a través del MTCC y la UMIP y les deseamos a todos muy buenas tardes. Hasta luego.
Desde el MTCC Latin America y la Universidad Marítima Internacional de Panamá estaremos presentando el webinar MEPC 76 y sus resultados técnicos hacia un transporte marítimo descarbonizado. El evento se realizará el próximo 2 de septiembre en horario de 9 de la mañana a 12 de mediodía. Esperamos poder contar con la participación de todos ustedes. En este seminario web abarcaremos los 2 requerimientos que fueron aprobados en la reunión del Comité de Protección de Medio Marino de la Organización Marítima Internacional, por sus siglas en inglés MEPC 76, donde se abarcaron los temas importantes para la reducción de la intensidad de carbono de la industria.